All right, geeks, here. I am here with Kelly Sue DeConnick. Like I said, I do not want to mess up anybody's name, especially yours.
No problem.
And I've been hunting you down since yesterday, and finally you have some time to talk with us. And we were able to meet up with Natalie as well. Natalie, everybody, you know Natalie. She's on the show regularly. And thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
So I've been fielding some questions from some of our viewers, our comic people, everything. Obviously, you're one of the biggest names in the industry, one of the strongest names in the industry. Like we were just talking about, I have 3 daughters, and for me, following people like yourself or getting them involved, it's very important. You obviously have a very strong voice in that. Can you talk a little bit about that as far as females in comics and strong female characters?
Yeah, I mean, there is... So comics in the United States are overwhelmingly dominated by the superhero genre. So in the U.S., when we think of comics, we tend to think of the superhero genre as primary. It's about 90% of the sales in our industry. But that said, even within the dominant genre, this perception that we have that this is a dude thing is not only incorrect but damaging, which is why I took issue with your site name. But there is nothing inherently masculine about heroism. There is nothing inherently masculine about even power fantasies. I am a 5-foot-tall woman. I can teach any man in this room about power fantasies. You want to know about feeling impotent in the world? Oh, sit down. Let's chat. There is no reason that any little girl who feels connected to these aspirations should feel aberrant. She should not feel like she is other. She should not feel that there is anything unfeminine about that. There's not. There's nothing unfeminine about strength, about the desire to be helpful, about the desire to stand up for the little guy. Those are all of the ethics that this genre is based on. And there's certainly nothing inherently masculine about telling stories with pictures.
It's actually very beautiful traits for a woman to have.
Yes, absolutely.
Strength in yourself, willingness to help others.
Absolutely.
You know, being strong even in shape. For a lot of these superheroes that are out there, male or female, they're very strong and in shape, and taking care of your bodies is a huge thing.
And and it's strong, athletic bodies come in all kinds of sizes and shapes. So this is another thing we're gonna diversify.
Yeah. So how much influence? And one of the things that I've always kind of taken issue with is how the female body is drawn mostly, even the heroines, where it's just boobs popping out and everything. And in your books, there isn't that. And that's one of the reasons I collect for my daughters, like Captain Marvel and everything. How much influence have you had on it being more about the character and the strength of the woman than, let's see how many lines and curves we can draw on this character?
Well, the thing is that, there is room in the world for all kinds of different books. There is room in the world for bondage fairies. There's room in the world for TNA comics. If that is your thing, I am not trying to take that away from you. I don't think that needs to be all of the comics, however. And it's not going to be my comics. And if that is what you need, don't buy my comics. And that is totally all right. And we will go about existing peaceably in the world. But the thing about that is, it largely assumes a heterosexual male audience, and again, it makes the female reader feel that she is other. That you are welcome to read this book if you like, but it's not for you.
Yeah.
No, my books are for you. My books are for everyone.
Absolutely.
Do you find yourself going after writing for strong female characters? Like I saw you wrote for Rescue in the past, which is, I'm a huge fan of Pepper Potts and Rescue, and now you're doing Captain Marvel. Do you find yourself seeking that out, or you're more apt to say yes when approached to write for characters like that?
Well, it's a difficult thing because on the one hand, you certainly don't, as a woman, don't need to just write women. There have been there have been times when I've pitched on hyper-masculine characters, and it was like, well, what would that look like? And it's like, you know, when Brian Bendis wrote Spider-Woman, no one was like, well, Brian Bendis is neither a spider nor a woman, you know?
And why not?
Yeah.
She's not a spider.
The assumption is made that as a writer, he can imagine what it might be like to be that character, and I have an imagination too.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, so a study was just released of the films that came out last year. Of the films released in the United States last year, 15%, 15% had female protagonists. 30% of the speaking roles were female. We are 50% of the population. And what happens is our little girls learn to identify with male protagonists because they're forced to, because there are a dearth of male protagonists. Because it is assumed that a man or a boy cannot identify with a female protagonist, because why would he? Because that's lower status in our society. Why would you do that? You don't want to identify down, you want to identify up. So we teach little girls how to identify with male protagonists, but we don't teach little boys how to identify with female protagonists. And if I may, this is for the internet, correct?
Yes.
That is some bullshit.
Say whatever you want.
Yeah, so what we need to do is be putting more female protagonists out in the world. So I have the problem of I can write across the board, and I would like to be able to write across the board. But as long as I have the opportunity to put more female protagonists into the world, I'm going to do that.
And that actually leads into a good question I got here from Casey, who's our comics editor, where he's talking about Miss Marvel. She's one of the big hot female characters right now. If you could help, or I would imagine you're with your work a great help right now bringing her to the big screen, what story would you tell?
Ms. Marvel?
Captain Marvel.
Or Captain Marvel. Well, he said Miss Marvel, but Captain Marvel.
Unless he's talking about Kamala Khan, maybe, who is the new Ms. Marvel.
I would imagine. I don't know why he said Miss Marvel.
Maybe he's a fake geek guy and he doesn't know who he's talking about.
No, he's a big geek. I don't know why he said that, but yeah, Captain.
Yeah, if
he
you were
did
gonna
say Captain Marvel there, so that's probably my bad.
Oh, all right.
But the Captain Marvel story, which story would you bring about to the big screen?
I don't know. I mean, I think I would write something new. I think there would need to be a simplified version of her origin story to get that in. But yeah, I mean, my pitch, my concept has always been Carol as Chuck Yeager, so it would be something.
Yeah, I got that from the comic. The Captain Marvel comic, I got it for them and ended up just engrossed in it myself.
Good.
But strong female leads all throughout, even who she runs into are female, warriors pretty much through the whole thing, and I really have enjoyed that myself, even as a man, and have tucked it away for them. Knowing that kind of thing, especially like myself being a father, what does something like that mean to yourself, that you are reaching young ladies?
Oh no, it's really important to me. It's really important. The reason that I am willing to have conversations like this, and the reason I'm willing to make you wildly uncomfortable, is so that my daughter won't have to do that. Because I mean, if you think about the history of our movement, I knew my great-grandmother. I lived with my great-grandmother for a time. So she was alive until I was in college. She was a young woman when we got the vote. Okay, so within her lifetime, within the lifetime of a woman I knew, we were property, essentially. We had no rights. Without the vote, we had no rights. And so we've come a very, very long way in a very short time, but at great expense. And because of the women because of Alice Paul, who was willing to be institutionalized and force-fed, we have the rights that we have today. So if I can speak up and risk being called names and make people uncomfortable in conversations they don't particularly want to have, that means that maybe my daughter doesn't have to do that, and maybe she can just focus on writing what she wants to write. She is awesome, and I am totally willing to do that for her.
No, that's fantastic. Believe me, I live with 4 women. It's tough for me to be uncomfortable about I'm the minority, so
All right.
believe me, I know that.
I have a question. We just brought up Kamala Khan.
Yes.
Assuming the name Miss Marvel, which
Yes.
our current Carol Danvers, who is Captain Marvel, used to be Miss Marvel.
Yes.
Is Kamala Khan and Carol Danvers going to have a lot of interaction? Because
Yeah, no, we haven't any proper crossovers planned at the moment,
Okay.
but we do. Willow and I get along quite well. We share an editor. We've talked quite a bit. I think it's something that has to happen at some point. And we do consider the books to be sister titles,
Yeah.
but we just haven't. I mean, for one thing, Carol's off in space right now, so
Right. I'm not completely caught up on our
yeah, no worries. It's so
Captain
cool.
Marvel, but I'm like chomping at the bit.
No
so
worries, no worries.
I'm
It's
getting
all
there.
cool.
I'm getting there.
No worries.
So right now, I know we just reviewed Ghost. Obviously working on that. What's next for you?
Well, actually, I'm leaving Ghost. So my
Okay.
last issue of Ghost, the first 3 of the new series, I co-wrote with Chris Sabella. Number 4, I wrote myself, and that's actually one of my favorite things I've ever written. I haven't seen the finished art yet, but the script I was really, really happy with. So that is my goodbye to the character, we see Elisa as a little girl and learn a lot about how she became the woman that she is. And that is my farewell. Then Chris takes over after that, and Chris is an excellent, excellent fit for that book. He's been a friend of mine for 15 years, and he's from Chicago, so that's perfect. And he's a huge horror film aficionado, so that makes that a good fit. And then so he'll pick up with 5, and it'll be his series from there on out. And I've got Captain Marvel, and I have Pretty Deadly continuing at Image, and also a book called Bitch Planet, and then I have
Is that a Bitch Planet question?
okay, and then I have Prometheus as well at the Omega issue at Dark Horse.
So Casey does ask about Bitch Planet. Bitch Planet sounds insane and fun. What was that pitch meeting like at Image?
Oh, it was so not even a pitch meeting. Like literally, I got an email from Eric Stevenson that said, "So what's next?" And I wrote back and said, hey, I'm working with this idea, this thing I kind of want to do, and sort of working title is Bitch Planet, but it's just a working title. And he wrote back and said, "I would very much love to publish something called Bitch Planet."
Done and done.
So that was it.
Sounds great. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you.
For Geeks with Wives, this is Chad.
All right, later.